Somewhere in the eastern islands of the Philippines, there is a city. It has towering buildings more advanced than anything modern architects have ever produced. Its streets hum with activity. Lights blaze from its windows even in the deepest hours of the night. Commercial pilots flying over the island of Samar have reported seeing it, glittering like a skyline in the dark, only for it to vanish completely the moment they changed course to get a closer look. Truck drivers from Manila and Cebu have received delivery orders, packed their cargo, driven hundreds of kilometers, and arrived at coordinates in the middle of dense forest with no address to be found and no one waiting. Fishermen have looked up from their nets and seen cathedral-like spires rising out of the water and disappearing into the clouds, and when they returned to shore, they could not explain what had happened to the hours they had lost. The city has a name. It is called Biringan, and the most unsettling part of this entire story is not that the city appears and disappears, it is that every single government agency that has been asked about it has given the same answer. Nothing. Complete silence. The island of Samar sits on the eastern edge of the Philippine archipelago, battered regularly by Pacific typhoons, and home to some of the most rugged terrain in Southeast Asia. It is the third largest island in the country, and for most Filipinos living in Metro Manila or Cebu, it remains one of the lesser-known and less-traveled corners of the nation. But among the people who actually live in Samar, particularly in the towns and barangays tucked into its interior provinces, there is a knowledge so deeply embedded in daily life that it shapes behavior, informs decisions, and drives real fear. The knowledge is simply this: there is a place between the towns of Gandara, Tarangnan, and Pagsanghan that exists outside the rules of ordinary geography. You will not find it on any official map produced by the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority. You will not find its name in any government registry, but you will absolutely find its name in the mouths of every elder, every fisherman, every tricycle driver, and every parent warning a child not to wander too far at night. The earliest recorded stories about Biringan began circulating in the 1960s, though many researchers believe the oral traditions surrounding this place go back far longer, passed along by the Waray-speaking people of Samar for generations before anyone thought to write them down. The name itself is telling. Biringan comes from the Waray language, and it translates to something that sends an immediate chill down the spine of anyone who thinks about it too carefully. It means the place where the lost are found. Not a comforting phrase when you begin to understand what kinds of people are allegedly being found there. Local elders describe it as a dimension that overlaps with the physical world, occupying the same geographic space as the forests and coastlines of Samar, but existing on a frequency that ordinary human senses cannot perceive. Those who have claimed to see it describe something that sounds nothing like the remote, undeveloped interior of Samar. They describe a metropolis, a gleaming, pulsing, technologically advanced city that makes places like Hong Kong or Singapore look modest by comparison. The physical descriptions of Biringan that have been collected from dozens of independent witnesses over the decades share a remarkable consistency. The buildings are described as massive, cathedral-like structures with an elegance that nobody has ever been able to fully articulate in words. Everything in the city, from the buildings to the vehicles to the food laid out on tables, is reportedly jet black, sleek, ultra-modern, and entirely obsidian. The streets are alive with movement. There is sound. There is light, paradoxically brilliant against the darkness of the structures. And the inhabitants, who are described as tall, pale, and extraordinarily beautiful, move through this city with the ease of people who belong to a civilization far beyond anything humanity has achieved. These beings are known in Philippine folklore as encantos. They are the enchanted ones. And there is one detail about them that every single witness, from every background, from every decade, reports identically. The encantos have no philtrum. That small ridge of skin that runs between the base of the nose and the upper lip, the defining feature of every human face, is simply absent from theirs. This singular anatomical detail has fascinated researchers of Philippine folklore for years because it is the kind of specific, obscure anatomical detail that does not emerge organically across multiple independent testimonies unless something is genuinely being observed. A person making up a story about a mysterious city is unlikely to focus on the philtrum. It is too specific, too medical, too anatomically precise to be the product of casual imagination. And yet this detail surfaces again and again, from fishermen in the 1960s to school children in the 1990s to social media accounts in the present day. Something about this consistency has troubled even skeptical researchers who approached the Biringan phenomenon purely from an academic standpoint, because the question is not whether Biringan is real in a literal physical sense. The question is why so many people, across so many decades, keep seeing and describing the exact same thing. The disappearances are where the story stops being merely fascinating and starts being genuinely disturbing. The communities surrounding the alleged location of Biringan have accumulated a quiet but persistent count of people who went missing and were never explained. Not missing in the way of tragic accidents or ordinary tragedies, missing in the way that leaves no trace, no body, no logical explanation, and no answer from authorities who are eventually contacted by desperate families. The Waray term for this particular kind of disappearance is bukot, which translates roughly to spirited away. When someone is believed to have been taken to Biringan, those who know them well often report the same warning signs in the days before the disappearance. The person begins acting strangely. They appear to be in a trance. They speak to people that others cannot see. They seem distracted by something just beyond the edge of perception. And then, one day, they are simply gone. What makes the disappearance accounts so difficult to dismiss is the detail that follows. According to the folklore, and more disturbingly according to the accounts of people who claim to have been taken to Biringan and returned, the city operates with a specific and ruthless rule. If you eat or drink anything while inside the city, you cannot leave. Your body in the physical world stops breathing. Your family mourns you. But you, your consciousness, your sense of self, continues to exist inside Biringan, unable to return, gradually losing the small physical marker that identifies you as human. The philtrum fades, and you become one of them. Researchers studying this legend from a psychological and anthropological perspective have noted that this particular aspect of the Biringan myth carries structural echoes of ancient folklore traditions found across vastly different cultures worldwide, from the Greek myth of Persephone eating pomegranate seeds in the underworld to the Celtic fairy traditions of Europe, where eating fairy food meant permanent captivity. The question of whether these parallels represent a universal human psychological truth or something stranger has never been satisfactorily resolved. The commercial activity connected to Biringan is one of the most thoroughly documented and verifiably bizarre aspects of the entire phenomenon. Beginning in the 1960s and continuing with remarkable regularity for decades afterward, port officials, delivery drivers, and courier companies operating in and around Samar began receiving shipments and delivery orders addressed to locations in Biringan City. Not cryptic addresses, not vague instructions. Specific addresses, specific recipients, and full payment in advance. Legal tender, real money. The first major documented instance involved a shipment of expensive construction equipment imported from the United States, which arrived at the port of Tacloban, addressed to a recipient at an address in Biringan City. Port officials, understandably confused, could find no such city in any registry. The shipment sat at the port for an extended period before being returned, and the original purchaser was never identified. This kind of occurrence did not stop. Across multiple decades, delivery trucks loaded with lumber, steel, construction materials, furniture, and luxury goods arrived in the province of Samar, carrying manifests addressed to Biringan. Drivers who followed the coordinates on their instructions found themselves pulling off the road in the middle of dense forest, with no building in sight and no one waiting to receive the cargo. In several of the most widely circulated accounts, drivers who pulled over to rest and fell asleep overnight woke to find their cargo gone, every piece of it. No tire tracks, no signs of unloading, nothing. The same documentation that records these accounts also notes, with some significance, that the payments made for these deliveries never bounced. The money was always real. Whoever was ordering these shipments had access to genuine currency and had no apparent interest in deception for financial gain. They simply wanted materials delivered to a location that no map could identify. Then came the story that crossed the boundary from folklore into something approaching verifiable corporate history. Sometime between the late 1980s and early 1990s, a Japanese company expressed serious interest in conducting rural development work in western Samar. The local communities in the area were puzzled because the region they were pointing to was not particularly developed and did not obviously lend itself to the kind of investment the Japanese representatives were describing. When locals asked what had drawn the company to this specific undeveloped patch of forested land, the answer was striking. The company's representatives produced a satellite-generated map that showed a brightly illuminated area, roughly the size of a city, sitting in the middle of what should have been dense forest with no significant population center. They had seen it on their imaging. They had identified what appeared to be, from orbital altitude, the heat signature and light output of a major urban area. They came to find it. They set up a worksite in the nearby town of San Jorge, and then the accidents began.
The accidents that plagued the Japanese company's worksite in San Jorge have been described by witnesses and researchers in various accounts over the years, and they follow a pattern that is difficult to attribute to ordinary construction site misfortune. Equipment failures occurred with unusual frequency. Workers were injured in circumstances that those present could not logically account for. The project, which had been launched with what observers described as serious intent and substantial investment, was shut down. The company left. They took whatever they could recover from the worksite and returned to Japan, having found nothing but forest at the coordinates where their satellite imaging had shown a city the size of a metropolitan area. The story circulates in Samar to this day, not as a warning against foreign investment, but as evidence. Evidence that Biringan was visible from space, but invisible on the ground. Evidence that whatever this place is, it has a way of protecting itself from those who come looking for it with purposes other than being lost.
Aviation accounts form another pillar of the Biringan testimony record that is particularly difficult to explain away. Filipino commercial pilots flying routes that take them over the eastern coast of Samar have, over the years, filed informal reports and shared personal accounts of something anomalous observed from the air. The accounts describe seeing, on clear nights, what appears to be a fully lit and operational city in a stretch of terrain where no such city exists. Lights consistent with a dense urban area, structures visible from altitude, the kinds of visual signatures that aircraft navigation systems and pilots are trained to recognize as populated ground-level areas. When these sightings are reported and the coordinates are checked against official maps and population registries, there is nothing there. The dense forest and river systems of interior Samar sit undisturbed by any building, any road network, any settlement of any meaningful size. Whatever those pilots were seeing above the clouds did not correspond to anything in the official record.
GPS technology introduced an additional layer of documented strangeness to the Biringan story. Beginning in the 1990s, as consumer and commercial GPS devices became widespread in the Philippines, users operating in and around the Samar region began reporting something that the technology should not have been able to produce. Their devices were picking up coordinates corresponding to a large populated area in the region where Biringan is said to exist. Not glitches, not simple errors, coordinate readings consistent with a substantial settlement. Some researchers have attempted to attribute these readings to natural magnetic anomalies in the Earth's crust in that region, which are known to affect navigational instruments. The Philippine archipelago sits on one of the most seismically and magnetically complex zones on Earth, positioned directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, and the geological structures beneath Samar are among the most complex in the region. Magnetic irregularities that could theoretically interfere with GPS calibration are not outside the realm of scientific plausibility. But the magnetic anomaly explanation does not account for what the eyes of fishermen, truck drivers, pilots, and ordinary travelers have been reporting for more than 6 decades. It does not account for the construction material deliveries. It does not account for the Japanese corporate investigation. It does not account for the philtrum. And it does not account for the silence, because this is the element of the Biringan story that researchers who have spent serious time with this subject consistently circle back to. The silence of official institutions is total and unbroken. Local government units in Samar do not issue statements about Biringan. The national government has never convened a formal inquiry. The National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, which maintains the most comprehensive geographic database in the country, has produced nothing that directly addresses the anomalous readings documented in the Biringan area. Scientists who are asked about it in public forums tend to offer the magnetic anomaly explanation and move on. Nobody in an official capacity has ever sat down, reviewed the cumulative record of pilot sightings, GPS anomalies, documented delivery orders, corporate investigations, and witness testimonies, and said anything substantive in response.
What the communities of Samar have done, in the absence of any official accounting, is what human communities across history have always done in the face of the unexplained. They have built a living, breathing tradition around the reality they experience on the ground. The way people in Samar navigate daily life in relation to Biringan is not superstition in the dismissive sense that word is sometimes used. It is a practical set of behavioral guidelines developed over generations by people who live adjacent to something they cannot fully explain and have learned, through painful experience, to respect. You do not call out loudly in areas near the supposed portals at night. You do not boast about beauty or good fortune when traveling through areas associated with Biringan, because the encantos are said to be drawn to those qualities in humans. You do not accept food from strangers you encounter in the deep forest, particularly if those strangers are unusually tall, unusually beautiful, and notably lacking a specific feature on their upper lip.
There are currently 7 portals to Biringan said to be scattered across the island of Samar, each located at a specific geographic point that locals have identified and marked in collective memory, if not on any official document. One of the most frequently cited portal locations sits at a very old tree on the grounds of Northwest Samar State University in Calbayog. The presence of a portal at a university is a detail that carries its own quiet irony, given the general institutional silence on the subject. Students at the university are aware of the tree, faculty members know the stories, and the tradition of knowledge about what that tree represents is passed from one generation of students to the next with a consistency and seriousness that suggests something more durable than casual legend. People who study at this university do not walk past that tree the same way they walk past any other tree on campus. They know where they are standing. Academic engagement with the Biringan phenomenon has increased in recent years, and the most significant development in this regard came from a 2025 study published in the International Journal of Language and Literary Studies by researchers from Samar State University. The researchers conducted qualitative fieldwork, gathering in-depth interviews from residents aged 50 and above who lived near the alleged portal locations. What they found was not the kind of vague, contradictory collection of superstitions that critics of folklore research might expect. The testimonies were structured, consistent, and detailed. 4 distinct themes emerged from the data. Biringan as a perfect dwelling place of extraordinary technological advancement. Biringan as a place of dangerous deception where accepting any offer carries an irreversible cost. Biringan as a protective force that shields loyal and respectful locals from harm. And Biringan as a place of healing where illnesses that defy modern medicine are said to be cured. That the same 4 themes emerged independently across multiple elderly residents who had limited contact with each other is the kind of finding that makes serious researchers pause.
There is one final piece of this story that does not get discussed enough, and it speaks to something much larger than the question of whether Biringan City exists in any literal sense. The Philippines is a nation of more than 7,000 islands, most of them deeply complex, geologically volatile, and layered with human history that stretches back far beyond the colonial records that are most easily consulted. The official map of the Philippines, the kind that appears in textbooks and government documents, is a product of centuries of cartographic decisions made largely by foreign powers. Spanish navigators, American administrators, and Dutch arbitrators who divided and renamed and erased according to their own purposes and limitations. The island of San Juan, a landmass that appeared on Portuguese, Dutch, French, and British maps for 200 years, was erased from Philippine cartography entirely, and its people absorbed into other territories without explanation. The island of Las Palmas, considered Philippine territory for decades, was quietly transferred to the Netherlands through an international arbitration decision in 1928 and removed from Philippine maps without any public accounting. The official map of the Philippines has been edited before, deliberately and without explanation to the people most affected. That history matters when you sit with the question of what Biringan is and why no official body will discuss it.
Whether Biringan City is a place that exists on some plane that current instruments and methods cannot fully document, or whether it is one of the most extraordinary, sustained collective cultural experiences in Southeast Asian history, the one thing that cannot be honestly said about it is that it is nothing. Too many people, across too many decades, in too many different roles and circumstances, have seen something above the forests of Samar. Too many delivery manifests have been written. Too much real money has been paid. Too many satellite readings have registered an anomaly in terrain that official records insist is empty. And too many of the people who went looking for a rational explanation came back quietly, without one. The official silence around Biringan is not the sound of a question that has been answered. It is the sound of a question that nobody in power has been willing to ask out loud. And in the Philippines, a country that has seen its maps redrawn and its geography re-explained by outside forces for centuries, the things that official institutions will not discuss openly have a long and unsettling history of turning out to be real.